Okay, we're live and can be heard, I believe. So, but just a second.
I feel weird being in front of you, but
That's better.
it's just like a weird show.
It's great things happen, each with a capital, like each starts with a capital,
Yeah.
and then 19 exclamation mark.
So welcome
Thanks.
to the council meeting, Tuesday, March the 16th. I'll call the meeting to order. We have quorum. Appointment, meeting of the secretary, I guess, Katrina.
So they have voted for council that the minutes are now to be done by a member of the committee, and then they are to be forwarded to the staff contact person for approval.
Which would be you for.
So yeah, it will come from
Okay.
me for approval, but somebody else would
Can we
too.
have a volunteer for this evening's minutes? Writing of the minutes.
I can try to capture a handwritten, but it won't be great. And then I'll have to type it out, so.
It'll be your first go at it, so.
I just don't have a laptop, so I just.
I'll do it. I brought my laptop incidentally.
Okay.
Or
Or I can
I
pull
will
it.
get the internet. Can you help me? What's the name of the?
I think it's
COC 1855 or
Yeah.
guest?
I think
and
it's guest.
Initially volunteered,
Okay,
but
sorry.
I was
That's okay.
realizing that I'll have to type them all out, which I don't have.
Sure, yeah, I don't understand the chicken scratch. Morgan, are you volunteering?
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks, Morgan.
thank you.
No problem.
Declaration of conflict of interest. Based on the agenda that we have this evening, anybody see any conflict of interest they'd like to declare? Okay,
I can bring up the
there are none, so let the minutes reflect that. Number 4, review and approval of the agenda. So everybody received the agenda. We have a motion to approve that.
I'll move. I'll second.
Sorry. who?
Terry
Yeah.
Bernard? No. Colleen?
Megan, second.
Megan seconder.
Approved minutes. Perfect. Or agenda. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
All in favor? Carried. Adoption of February 16th minutes. Have everybody had a chance to read them?
I haven't seen the agenda.
Any issues? Might be. No. Can we have a motion to adopt the minutes of February the 16th?
I'll move it.
Brad, move. Seconder. Phil is smiling.
Sure, I'll.
Good catch, Bernie.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Items for discussion. We have a presentation from Rhea.
Don't just, yeah, it's pronounced Sadich.
Savage.
Not
Is
bad.
that it?
Welcome to the council meeting.
Thanks.
I think we've got 10 minutes to let you give a presentation, and the floor is yours.
Okay. I did bring a PowerPoint. If I could show that, that would be great, but we can also do it without.
Okay, I can get that set up. I had
Yeah,
indicated.
didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh, my
Okay.
apologies.
No, no,
If
that's
it's
fine.
inconvenient, it's really fine.
Well,
We can do it
quickly
without.
try and see how it goes, and yeah,
Okay.
I'll see. I think it should be okay, but. You would just have to come back here and put that.
Yeah.
Does it have, does it have an HDMI?
It was in an email. I wasn't in here. It's in an email.
I know, I got it in an email somewhere, but I can't.
Oh, okay.
remember. I thought it was gonna be here
Yeah, for sure.
on the screen.
Never mind, I'm not sure.
That's okay, we can see. Not that one, you want to see the other side? Yeah, that's that one. Oh, so there you go. It should just work if you plug it in there, but we will see.
Oh my God, what is?
I'm really sorry about this.
No,
Yes. No worries.
And is it capital for things and capital? Which is great.
Yes, all of them. Yeah.
Thanks for sending that back.
Or just those, for all the letters?
For all the,
Oh, yeah.
no, for all the words.
For the whole thing, is it caps?
No.
Just for great,
There's
Capital
G.
Yeah.
Things,
Perfect.
capital.
Exactly, yeah.
Green
That's what I
tape.
thought.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
I'm having a hard time here. I'm not having a good time at all. I'm like wanting to go home.
That's all it's going on.
It is, it's all it takes is technical difficulties and I get to go lose my mind.
Nobody's really.
Okay, there you
Nobody
go.
really knows.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for giving us this opportunity to present. My name is Rhea, and this is Erin. And what we would like to propose is a garden sharing initiative that would hopefully take place here in Charlottetown this year. So the main idea is essentially a program that connects people who want to grow food in a home garden setting with people who have backyards, have the space, would like a garden, but don't want to or are unable to do the work. So essentially it connects people with land with people with labor, if you want to use sort of the classical economist's terms. So in essence, an avid gardener would be paired up with someone with a backyard. They would decide what they want to grow and share the produce throughout the season. So who would our participants be? So as was mentioned, participants can be categorized either as homeowners or as gardeners. So our gardeners would be providing the labor. They would be responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of the garden. So that would include everything from planting seedlings to weeding them to harvesting the produce. So they would be doing the bulk of the work. They will not be asked to contribute financially to the project, nor will they get any money for their work. So all of this is on a volunteer basis. And some target demographics could include newcomers, stay-at-home parents, university students who are off for the summer, or people like me in their mid-20s living in an apartment who just need some space to grow veggies. So our homeowners, and this could also include people who do not actually physically own their homes, they just rent a space with a backyard or are in Charlottetown for the summer, they would be providing the land. So they would let someone come in and dig up their backyard in exchange for some fresh vegetables throughout the season. And they would also be responsible for providing other necessary inputs, so things like some basic tools, as well as they would be responsible for purchasing things like seeds, seedlings, any kind of small gardening implements like trellises or twine that would be required to run a successful home garden. And some of our target demographics could include senior citizens, and these can be people who already have gardens, are really knowledgeable about gardening, but no longer have the physical ability to garden. So having someone come in and help them out would be advantageous for the senior citizen demographic. But this demographic could also include young families, busy working professionals, and really anyone who has a backyard and just wants vegetables. So having the space is kind of the main criteria for this category of participants. So Erin will now explain how our program will work.
So our role is voluntary, but also fairly minimal. We would get the program running, and then the relationships that are established between the gardeners and the homeowners, they would take it from there. We would still be available for problem solving, helping source out tools, seeds, anything that people might need. But basically, once we get it set up and running, hopefully everything would run smoothly and the relationships would do their thing. But we're looking at advertising early spring, and we have a schedule laid out, but that people would sign up either as a gardener or a homeowner, online or in person if we do have some events where people could sign up in person. And then we would be the matchmakers who would connect people. And then give people a week or two to meet, whether it's virtually or by phone for people who may not have the tech savvy way to connect. And then if we had to reorganize, if there were people that weren't a good match for what their needs are, what their wants are, we can do that before the growing season.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry if I'm jumping around. Right, so we would have an agreement that people would sign, then everybody's on the same page for how they're going to divvy up the work plus the produce. And we would also meet with them to make sure everybody is on the same page and see if they have any questions.
So just kind of one thing to mention. What we were hoping is that we would get all of our participants to commit to growing using organic methods. We want our participants to have a lot of freedom with regards to what they can get out of their partnership. So if, for example, a gardener is interested in carpentry and offers to build the homeowner they're working with a raised bed, that could be part of the agreement. Or if a younger gardener is working with a senior citizen with a lot of gardening know-how, they could agree to kind of work out sort of more of a mentorship role for the homeowner. So participants would be able to discuss amongst themselves what exactly they want out of their relationship. And so this allows people to have a lot of freedom. And really the only thing they would need to do is just stipulate these kind of add-ons to the basic exchange model in the written agreement. So just to be sure that it's on paper and no one's going to get exploited by excess demands.
Right, so our role after things are running are just to check in with the participants, help them in any way they need, refer them to other resources if there's learning experiences going on within the community that might help them out, or people with tools or know-how that might help them with their specific project.
So essentially this initiative, once the initial matchmaking process has taken place, is more or less self-organizing. And we think that's one of the best parts about this initiative. It can have lots of participants, but wouldn't require too much management. You wouldn't need extra financial inputs to scale it up. And as we mentioned before, people have a lot of freedom in deciding what they want out of their partnerships. So we kind of came up with a tentative timeline, but essentially we were hoping to kind of start actually recruiting participants as soon as possible, start the program in early June, and kind of make it a cutoff point for new people to join at the very latest June 20th. So that's kind of when the growing season gets into full swing, so we probably would not be accepting any more people at that point. Yeah, so the really great thing about this initiative is that it could theoretically be run on a very small budget because everyone involved is volunteers, and our role would be primarily administrative, sort of more of a middleman position. We could, however, make use of grant funding for things like starting a tool pool so that homeowners and gardeners wouldn't need to purchase market garden specific implements like broad forks or triangle hoes, which are useful but hard to find. Sanitation kits would be great, just given the fact that we are gardening in a pandemic. It would be nice to get financial support for low-income participants. However, these would not be necessary to start up a pilot version of this initiative. So why does Charlottetown need an initiative like this? And this is our concluding point. So we think this is a great way for community members to share land, food, and resources. It's an opportunity to create productive urban green spaces. It does, we hope, serve as a way to reduce the shortage of community garden plots in Charlottetown. And because it's outside and only involves the interaction of 2 households, it's a very safe way to garden during a pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would there be a specific ask
From us
for
to
the
you?
presentation? You see the $200 or $300. Would that be the ask that you're asking the food council?
I mean, I was honestly not prepared for that question.
We were more looking for feedback, if any.
Yeah.
Just to show it.
Well, okay, I can provide lots of that.
Right. But in terms of
Yes.
funding, no, we would be happy to apply for grants if you know it, we know of a few that are out there, or if you know of them. But really, it's just printing off posters at this point and maybe providing hand sanitizer or sanitizing kits, which we would be happy to cover if we didn't have funding.
It's a great idea, well presented, and
Extremely.
there's probably people that have questions or comments.
I do, if I could start, is that okay? I will tell you that the Community Foundation has a Growing Together
Yes.
grant, and it's quite, it's the easiest grant application you'll ever undertake to do, and it's, it can be quite lucrative. It's usually, although there is it doesn't cover like 100% of your proposed expenses, it does cover a significant proportion. So, perhaps if you were to put together a project sort of budget proposal, that might be something I would, I would suggest that this might be, like that shortfall, if it's 25 or 30%, that might be something that this group might give consideration to covering. I don't know, that's just me talking, obviously. But the Community Foundation does have that Growing Together fund.
From my understanding, you need to be a
No,
registered.
you do not.
You do not? Okay,
You do
that's
not.
fantastic.
No, you do not.
Yes.
It does say that, but we have through Des Brisé, which is not, we're not a registered, we're just a group of gardeners that.
Oh, that's so fantastic.
So, and we've accessed those dollars repeatedly, or routinely. And I did notice, like, as you were going through it, like there will be some advertising expenses, I would expect. I think a tool library, or like being able to sort of connect with that tool library, the existing tool library, would be a really beneficial way, or existing community gardens as well. I think that's a really great way to sort of build that community capacity that you're talking about, because I think that's where the real strength is in this proposal. And things like seeds too, again, working with, maybe the PEI Seed Alliance, or even Vesties are usually quite generous.
With the seed libraries.
Or the seed libraries. I think that there's all kinds of opportunities to work collectively with those organizations. And then, compost is probably one of the most basic inputs, and it's really like, finding a way to source compost reliably. And a good source of compost that has sort of like, if you're looking at achieving sort of organic production methods, finding compost that sort of is as close to that kind of approaches as possible. So, so basic supplies is what I kind of identified, and then, some kind of, and I think the knowledge exchange is really important as well. And I think that, finding ways to bring that group of people together, that might be another part of your budget. Like sort of events that could sort of collectively bring some of those people together to share that knowledge and that experience. I think building community is really, gardens do that, they just naturally do that. And so I think that's all I want to say, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, excellent graphics.
I have a question. So, you guys are just like two keeners, like you're working on your own, you're not associated with any organizations currently?
No.
Okay. Cool. Mostly for the minutes, just to make sure.
Okay.
That might be another.
I think it's important to connect with other organizations.
Yes.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're building that. Like Karen said, like we don't need to have 2 different tool libraries in Charlottetown. We should be making the tool library that exists better by having a gardening section and drawing people's attention to the fact that they can, be part of that.
And I
That's
think we
awesome.
have some gardening tools
Yeah, I got in touch with Daniel Cousins, who runs the tool library. And yeah, actually, I did not think of potentially finding a way for the tool library to acquire more gardening tools as a solution to this. So thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah,
That's
and I
amazing.
think that
He
might be
would probably
really,
appreciate the, like, I think he struggled in the past with membership and stuff like that, so you could look at sponsoring some of your members, like, you could include that in a grant proposal, would be to say, like, you know, maybe you provide a reduced rate as part of your pilot or something like that, and help purchase some of those tools for that.
yeah.
I think that's a really important piece for some of the conversations we've continued to have over the last year about building community, individual assets, and our food asset map. And so having that central, rather than all these different silos, that would be a really great connection, I think. And I think there's, you know, the folks out there doing some of that work, so building on those strengths and, you know, taking on this great initiative, I think it's important. I live in an apartment, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I would love to be involved
Yeah.
with this whenever I lived in a tiny place downtown.
Yeah.
Would have been great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would there be any like householder insurance?
I was
Things.
wondering that.
Yeah. And I might have thoughts like if someone were to injure themselves
Mhm.
gardening in my backyard, am I liable?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It might be.
And maybe
if you
that's
work-
just part of the agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You may
It
want
might,
some legal.
it might be that,
consultation on
yeah.
that.
It might be
also.
that you can only really provide, like, you can only really accept people that own their homes.
Right.
Because as part of their home insurance, they would have
Yeah.
some kind of liability
Okay.
Liability
insurance.
insurance.
And something that came to mind too, like very potential snag would be, you might get keen renters signing up, but they don't actually have the authority to dig up their yards.
Right.
Yeah.
So you might just wanna tread carefully there, but that's my only, that's
And make-
my only
maybe
flag. I
focus
think
on
other than that,
home
it's
just
a really
to-
simple, you know, there's really no downsides at all, really.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be negative, just.
No,
No, it's good
to
to
raise
in
these
this
points is just
world.
so helpful for us.
Yeah.
Ray, as I mentioned to you online there's a lot of community gardeners that start out very enthusiastically, and then they go away on vacation, or they just get tired, or they don't have time. So your idea is a great idea. It doesn't, I don't think it necessarily has to be for property owners, though. It could be for people that just want to have a garden, might be in a community garden space. The only other thing that I raise a concern with the presentation is that I wouldn't offer to resolve disputes. Okay? We'll just leave that to the people that are having a dispute. You don't want to get involved.
Okay.
Any other comments or suggestions we can offer Ray and Ann? I think it seemed to fit really well in the integrated community sustainability plan. If you've had a chance to look at the cities, there's the goal number 4 is on food, and you've ticked off a lot of the actions that the city was trying to work towards. So in asking for money for grants, you mentioned some of these things. You might be able to be successful in the city's micro grants and
Yeah,
maybe
which will be
the community.
launching hopefully next month, early next month.
Great.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
What we've done in the past for other groups too is if they had projects that we supported, but like they could potentially find funding somewhere else, we've written a letter of support. So that would be something that we can probably
Absolutely.
offer you guys after a bit of discussion, but
Absolutely, yeah.
And one other,
that's a really easy thing for us to do,
Okay.
to support your project.
Yeah.
and one other thing I would offer as well through the city is sometimes, although the funding you're talking about, Karen, doesn't require you to be registered, there are fundings that do, and sometimes the city will partner as the registered donee, lead applicant with you, so you would be eligible for the funding. So that's definitely something we could look at as well.
Okay.
You'd be a qualified donee partnering with someone who would be like a
Yeah.
registered not-for-profit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, in finding those other partners too, it might not
Yeah,
only be the
no,
city, it
not-
might be, I have an organization that I work with that I think that would be quite keen to probably work with you on this if it needs building capacity and connecting potentially with growers and so on. I think that there's a lot of opportunity and potential there for sure.
thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you very
Taking
much.
the time, the initiative, great little project.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much for your feedback. It's honestly so valuable for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you need a letter of support, let us know.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item for discussion is policy review updates. So we all have kind of partnered with.
Thank you.
See ya.
See you.
Thanks.
So we all partnered, I think we were 2 or 3. Some groups had 3, some groups had 2. And we were going to present any findings we may have this evening. First up is food waste, and we have Colleen, Brad, and Megan as folks who are going to look the bylaw on that. Did you find anything, or lack of, or?
Yeah, we found a few things. There was, like 4 topics that we really kind of fleshed out a little bit. The ones that I specifically worked on were composting, like specifically home composting, and food waste with regards to packaging. So for the composting, it was very interesting. Like, it doesn't specifically say anywhere in the bylaws that you can't compost at home, but it doesn't say that you can. And there are a few clauses that I found that pretty much say that you can't. Like specifically the nuisance bylaw. It identifies, except where other collection methods have been made with Island Waste Management Corporation, waste, compost, and recyclable materials shall be in receptacles/containers or packaged as approved by IWMC and placed by collection by IWMC in front of premises as close, blah, 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 blah. So, like, one, I don't know why a private organization is identified in bylaws. It should just say service provider, just in case, something happens.
Provincial.
They're a private organization, though. They're a Crown Corp.
But a Crown Corp is still a private organization.
It's still a for-profit organization, so it should just say service provider.
Yeah, I mean,
And
green on
that,
Yeah.
like reading that identifies that you can't have compost in your backyard at home. So if you have a neighbor that doesn't want you composting in your backyard, they could use this clause. I don't think it would ever happen, but it's just, it's something that needs to be reviewed anyway.
Should be more vigorous.
Yeah, there was also just like a few other clauses, the provincial water resource management regulations. It prohibits any person to dispose of compostable material except at the appropriate landfill or composting facilities approved by accepted, so I don't know, obviously that isn't looking at people composting in their backyard, but I mean, it is, like, when you're looking at the black and white of regulations, it would identify that you can't compost in your backyard. But I mean, just fixing these few things would help give some clarification. In terms of, like, I was looking at other best practices. The city of Fredericton has a really good write-up. Like, when you type in composting Charlottetown, it links you right to IWMC. Like, there's no information on the city website about composting at all. It just a direct link to a private website, which was just recently updated. But if you go to the Green Isle website, it is very out of date. The city of Fredericton, it right away says that you should be composting at home. It saves 20 to 30% of all material going into landfills. And then it links to city pickup. Now I think their city pickup is like done by the city as opposed to like what we have here for the province, but then again, they're a much bigger province, so. And then I was also looking at universities and how they deal, because it's very similar population sizes. Like UBC, for example, has 65,000 students, 11,000 live on campus. So that's very comparable to the city of Charlottetown in terms of population, in terms of the amount of waste that they're going to be generating. So they have a complete, like a lot of universities, UBC, Simon Fraser, Ottawa U, they all have these, in-house composting capabilities where they all do in-vessel composting. And so there's like definitely, when you look at the population sizes, it's very similar. Instead of looking at larger cities like Ottawa with 1 million people, it doesn't really compare to Charlottetown with 35,000. And then there's also a private company called Loop Resources. They're mostly out west in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And they kind of go and collect commercial plant-based composting material to compost. I looked at, or I talked to a few restaurants here, like Famous Peppers, for example. They have 6 restaurants on the island, and they have their own greenhouses where they grow all their own herbs and stuff. So they collect all of their plant-based compost from their restaurants and then use that to feed their greenhouses. Like I know Kyle at Sims, he has he has a farm, One Vision Farm, so he gets all the plant-based compost out of Sims and does that. So there can be, with like the food asset map, we could maybe have a good way to link up people that want to do this. And if this, home gardening thing goes, like there's ways that we could take a lot of that plant-based compost and then utilize it for composting for community gardens and everything like that. And then that saves, a lot going into the landfills. But like UPI, all they do, it just all goes to Green Isle. And I don't think they're sorting at all.
Yeah, I think if it goes to
Pretty
Green
sure
Island,
it just all goes into landfill.
Yeah, it goes to,
Yeah.
it goes away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because like the big dumpster bins outside of restaurants where they have compost, cardboard, garbage, there's no separators. It's just all big one pile. But like breweries, they give their spent grain to pigs. There's lots of ways to utilize these all the plant-based products coming out of these restaurants and such. Anyway, so we have a sheet, I guess, that we'll share that's like a little bit more detailed. And then another one that I looked at was the packaging waste. So I saw the Bring It Charlottetown. That's a great initiative. Obviously, it was halted because of COVID. But it seems like Charlottetown is pretty proactive with it. I'm assuming it was because of the looming, the end of this year, the federal government is wanting to stop single-use plastics. There's really no information on what that is. They're just going to stop, I guess. Like, they're just going to stop making plastic forks. Like, I don't really understand what the federal government is trying to do with that. I mean, it's great concept, but yeah, the Bring It Charlottetown. The one thing that I saw that was an issue was that to be like a Bring It business participant, you had to sign up. Like I signed up, they got back to me, for my business, and they like provide support, I guess. I haven't really talked to them too much yet about it, but it does say on the website for it that they must have a system in place to ensure that products are being sanitized. I just wanted to know who reviews that system.
What, like you mean a policy in place for like the refilling of water bottles and that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like it says on the website that they must, and the word must was used.
Yeah.
And in a regulatory standpoint, that word is very specific.
Yeah.
And so it says that they have to have a plan to identify how they're going to ensure there's no cross-contamination, but who's reviewing that plan?
Yeah, I'm not sure I think it's more indicating, I'm just gonna look at the wording. This is technically falls under me, but it's been on hold and I was
Yeah.
the one that wrote all of it. But I think it's more referring to like, I see what you're saying. It would go
Yeah.
through the province. We would give them a contact to the province and it would have
Because
to be reviewed.
in the food premises regulations that identifies that, you know, all utensils, equipment, and food contact surfaces used in food premises are cleaned and sanitized in a manner that removes contamination in accordance with the requirements of whatever schedule that they have in whatever appendix. So it's just like if we're wanting to, like, there may need to be some connection with environmental health.
Yeah, and
For
so-
them to review a system to ensure that, because like at the deli, people would come in with their own containers and I would wash the container and
Yeah.
then put the product in it.
Yeah, so there's been
Yeah.
extensive communication with them.
Yeah.
Some of it done by me, most of it done by the person whose position I'm covering, but prior to me being
Mhm.
here. But the reason that the stipulation is in the bring it business is specifically for water bottles and coffee mugs is because the risk is so much lower that the protocols are accordingly lower.
Okay.
So like public health, I think kind of has a bit of a standard, or environmental health has a bit of a standard that like they want you to follow this protocol, but in general, you taking a water bottle, putting water in it and giving it back is very low risk.
Yes,
There's a much higher risk with a container.
yes.
And that's why this does not touch on that. So
Okay.
if somebody wanted to do that, they could. It sounds like in general, environmental health is not really game for that. Like they don't really want people doing that at all.
No,
And that's why we didn't include it.
okay.
Our recommendation, if somebody was more interested in something like that, would be to have more of a container exchange program.
Okay, okay.
So you would, you know what I mean, like you would bring in your container, leave it there, take a new one, you have to deposit on the container.
I see, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But anybody putting in that policy, I would have to look back in all of the old documents. I think either we had sort of like a
Yeah.
written thing from the province saying what it would need to include, or I think,
Well, just like usually when you're like writing some sort of a system, you would follow a standard that would be set out. So
I think-
what is this? What standard is this system going to be related to?
Yeah.
So people know what they're supposed to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think we kind of have that, and then I think the idea is just that environmental health has provided these sort of guidelines, they're expected to follow them, and need to have this policy at any such time that they would be inspected. And I
Yeah,
think that
okay.
there's assistance from environmental health should they need it. I will say too, though, that we've been looking at potentially relaunching this program, and that
Yeah.
stipulation in general would be void at the moment. Like, we wouldn't require the refilling of water bottles and coffee mugs right now.
No, not until well. there's
Yes,
no
yes,
water.
allowed. Yeah.
And it's good to hear those conversations happening. I think we talked at length a little bit about, you know, anything to make it easier for the businesses, because if this is an initiative we want folks to be partaking in,
Yeah.
but then there's this separate plan that you have to have, but then EHOs never necessarily inspect it, like where are the synergies? So
Yeah.
we were just,
Mhm.
that's sort of where we talked about, but if you're already engaged with
Yeah, I mean, I've had some
So-
like brief conversations
Yeah.
recently just around the potential relaunch of it, but I know Jess was
Yeah.
in like
Yeah.
constant contact with them when she and to some extent I was developing it.
Yeah, I think it's just like post-COVID, once we get back to a world where we're trying to promote, bring it for, you know, more broad
Yeah.
containers and things, how can we make it easier for businesses so they don't feel like they're liable or,
Mhm.
you know, gonna get dinged on an
Yeah.
inspection or something?
Yeah, because I think like the federal initiative, like there's really no information on it, and they seem to be like timelines to 2030. So I mean, it's just like government runs on 4-year cycles, so things may all change. There may be a pro-plastic prime minister at some point.
And I had
but,
said, I think they're just trying to align with the SDGs, because there hasn't been anything, and that's a big component
Yeah.
of SDGs, they've gotta just put a date on it, so.
Yeah.
But it said that there was like funding to supply wooden utensils and stuff.
Yeah, when there's
Yeah.
a starting supply of them,
Okay.
and then we have a preferred
It was,
rate as well,
Yeah.
but I think we'd have to revisit that given that it's been a year since it was all, like I know like even the local supply of all of that has changed a lot in the last year, like there might be, like currently the company we're able to get the best rate with was out of Montreal, so it's Canadian, but
Yeah.
like, I think there may be potential more now to probably negotiate some sort of deal.
Yeah, because I have wooden utensils at the deli, and there's, you see wooden utensils around, but they're very hard to get on the island.
Yeah,
I
so
had
they
to-
still are hard to
I had to
get.
beg and plead K's to bring them in.
Yeah.
And
We-
and they were quite expensive. You're looking at 7 cents of
Yeah, they're way
utensil,
more, yeah,
which is
definitely.
a lot more expensive.
So, and I think,
My sandwiches were expensive, so it's fine.
but the recommendation would be to have that and to only like offer it when asked for, kind
Yeah.
of thing, and then also to couple that with the promotion of like bringing your
Yeah.
own cutlery, right?
Just because, like, also those compostable plastics, like, it's not anything good.
No, and that's,
No,
so if you
exactly.
bring it business,
Yeah.
it's actually like a requirement to get rid of all of them.
Yeah. So people think that, because it's still made of plastic, it's just that plastic breaks down into smaller pieces of plastic, which
Yeah.
is even worse. But yeah, and like, just the main thing, like, there was a styrofoam ban for, I guess, only street vendors?
Only street.
Only street vendors, okay. So brick and mortar places can still use styrofoam,
Correct,
okay.
yeah.
Why was it only street vendors?
Well, we don't actually know the answer to that.
Okay.
Or who put it in, that bylaw, but it's there, and that's great. And so then, when we were working around all of this, Jess and I were talking about looking at a styrofoam ban, or like a bylaw for the city.
Yeah.
And the reason that we did not pursue that was because the province was working on one.
Oh,
I have
okay.
no idea that was a year ago.
Oh.
I have no idea what's happening
Yeah,
in the wake of that.
yeah. Because like, I see it, well, I mean, being in the meat industry, you see it everywhere. Styrofoam is everywhere. And like Ottawa, Vancouver, they could recycle styrofoam. We don't have the capability to recycle styrofoam on the island, so, and like Sobeys is essentially built on styrofoam. So it's hard to get any sort of traction on any of this when
Yeah.
the large companies that people frequent more aren't participating.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good to get the small players in because it's, usually small players are a little bit more socially conscious as well.
Yeah.
So, but,
Yeah, and I mean, this whole project had a lot of
yeah.
plans behind it too that died in
Yeah.
COVID, right? Like, we were hoping to do engagement with some of the larger, like, who knows where it would have gone, it's hard with the larger companies.
it's like-
to do the engagement
Yeah.
with them, and, I know like Jess called Tim Hortons like 50 times. And like, I literally got a different path and a different person.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
horrible, but, the plan was to try with, and see who, you could get to bite, but.
But I mean, like, all the work done is, it's great, like, there's, the website's really informative, it's just so unfortunate that, well, many reasons why COVID's unfortunate, but yeah, once we can get things going back, I think it'll be really easy to jump back in, for sure.
I think that's
I
why
wonder if
we looked at
the,
4 different topics.
mindset needs to change. We ourselves are calling it food waste, and the Island Waste Management Corporation is collecting it. And if you've been to their composting facility, it's really pretty disgusting.
It's scandalous, really.
It's unbelievable, really. And I think Island Waste Management Corporation has had long enough time to clean up their act and start making a decent product. That maybe we need to recommend that this start being treated as a resource instead of a waste product. And if Island Waste Management doesn't get it together to make a quality product in a certain amount of time, that it should be tendered out to another organization to collect the restaurant waste. It might be really hard to do household waste because it's really hard to get people to really properly separate it, but at least stores and restaurants.
Yeah.
Because it really is unfortunate waste. That compost facility is like it's really remarkable.
Yeah. And like a lot of that compost, it's like, there's a lot of salt in that compost. It's a lot of processed foods. that's what people eat.
Well,
So,
there's a lot of foreign material in it. That's
Yeah,
it's
lot
not
of
allowed to go
foreign
on. It's
material.
not allowed to go on a single farm in the province.
a lot of dyes from
Yeah.
the box cardboard, you know, like it's
Yeah,
not the
I
best
don't
compost.
understand that.
Best,
Paint
like
Yeah.
glass more than.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's too much foreign. I mean, and they tell us it's a grade A.
But it's not.
It's not. I mean, and as I said, you know, from like food safety will go in and say no.
Yeah.
No, like do not. Like if you use this, our Canadian Horse Council has said if you guys use that crap,
Yeah.
you know, we're not going to give you a food safety certificate. So like, you know, it's just.
But also with the composting
Sure,
aspect, like the food map can really help if there's, like, I don't know what the council can specifically do other than maybe help coordinate, but like finding ways to get all that plant-based compost from restaurants. Because there's, 350 restaurants in Charlottetown, so we should be able to get a lot of that compost and utilize it, get some in-vessel composting, but, I mean, that's a lot of work, I guess.
Yeah,
But I mean,
you
there's-
can also, there's also potential to put forward a recommendation to the Environment and Sustainability Committee to like write to IWC or the province and say that these issues are on, like, I don't know if this will do anything, but it's a possibility as well, sort of like lobby. for-
Well, maybe if the city does that. I mean, I know many agricultural organizations have been pushing this very issue for a very long time
Yeah.
with no change, because I mean, we're input, we need, particularly in the sector that I work in, we need more inputs.
Yeah.
Like compost, carbon-based inputs. And there is a resource that we can't even go near, And I'd like to know where they're, like, I mean, are they still dumping that crap out in Rose Valley, It's an environmental, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. And nobody wants to talk about it. So when we take this to government, I mean, this is a great idea, but, when we take it to government, it's like, well, it's grade A material. Well, okay, well, that's great, but how come Cavendish Farms won't allow it on their fields? How come, no one.
Rated by what standard?
Yeah, by whose by the Compost Council of, Lithuania, I guess, I don't know. It's infuriating, quite frankly, anyway, I mean, I think that if we could, like you say, start on a small scale and demonstrate that there is capacity
Yeah.
to do something, I think that would be a very good start. And then maybe shame them into, cleaning up their act and doing something.
And the other piece is too, at the end, we talked a bit about, there's the sort of population, city level, and business level, and then there's the individual level, which we know is harder, but ensuring that some of those bylaws that Brad had looked into, that, it's not gonna be countered. Your neighbor's gonna be like, oh, that's unsightly, you're not allowed to compost based on this,
on
because that's what
this nuisance
it
bylaw.
says, so,
Yeah.
And those are
just
some
making sure.
Yeah, like if we take across all of the areas potentially that have been addressed within the nuisance bylaw, if we make all those changes, like I feel like that's a pretty easy.
Well, I think the nuisance bylaw is the one that's going to emerge every
Yeah, I
time we
think
talk
so.
about, I mean, it's,
Bees and.
Yeah.
and it's the same two bylaws. It's the unsightly premises bylaw and the nuisance bylaw
Yeah.
that I think will emerge consistently throughout whatever
Yeah.
conversation we're having with relation to.
And then also like advocacy on how to do it, I guess, because like if you doing composting properly, it shouldn't smell, but like shouldn't have accidents if you drive properly, but.
Yeah.
So we had
So-
4 different areas too, I think.
Yeah, so the 2 other topics were more around food recovery, as in nutrition for humans, around things like spoilage, best before dates, incorrect shipments, like lower quality, lower grade type things. So kind of looked at that from the perspective of my first start, I guess, the first kick at it was what can be done in terms of food rescue, food recovery, and then moving that into streams of food for populations potentially at risk for food insecurity or schools or something like that. So in terms of looking at the city bylaws, there's nothing really hindering that. The Donations of Food Act provincially sort of facilitates that. So that's sort of a good thing. I looked an awful lot at sort of Vancouver, Victoria. Vancouver has a Love Food Hate Waste initiative that the Federation of Municipalities, Federation of Canadian Municipalities are part of, and I'm sort of wondering if Charlottetown is.
Of that, sorry, what did you call it again?
It's the Love Food Hate Waste.
If we're part of that initiative,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I haven't heard
Yeah,
that we are.
that's
I feel like
okay.
I would have if we were.
Just, I say, I'm just digging
Yeah.
up stuff. And so that's just an interesting thing that is happening that could be something in terms of joining too. And so they kind of go at a series of different levels. Interestingly, so Sobeys is a partner in that, and they partnered with Prince Street School to provide smoothies for school breakfast and help reduce food waste. So imperfect produce that didn't meet the needs of the consumers went to this school with Chef Nathan Schoenfeld to make smoothies.
Yeah, I knew that sounded familiar.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I don't know if it's active or not, but that's an example
I
that
think
I
that
would
was
not have
one
thought
of,
about.
but I think that
Yeah.
that could be something that
And the school food
more
program
partners
is doing it, and,
Yes.
you know, kind of doing that sort of stuff. And I think, you know, I also was really interested in, like, getting to the Food Bank, the Soup Kitchen, or Salvation Army, or any of those places, just because the yogurt says it's best before March 17th, like, the best before it's kill me. So Food Banks Canada has, like, a risk model that organizations could use to decide if they are willing, or is it safe to give the food to those places. And then I remember years ago, Mike McDonald basically saying the food bank just basically said, we're not taking anything that's past its best before. So, like, so there's our hurdle, but it's a strategy that kind of looks at two problems, and keeping it out of the compost, and then the other one, and this isn't my, you know, particular favorite, but you see a lot of this, like in Guelph, that whole area, Vancouver, consumer behavior and best befores, and how to shop properly, how not to have your broccoli rotting in the bottom of your fridge and all that kind of stuff. And it is consumer behavior, it's not policy bylaw related by any means, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be a really good public initiative that could go along with composting. Is like, here's how to prevent your broccoli from going bad, here's what to do with it if it's starting to head down the road, and if it gets down to the end of the road, you know, give it to the worms in the backyard, sort of thing. But just lots that can be done around reducing food waste. I pulled up some stats on, like, the millions of pounds of food, kilos, tons of food that are wasted every year. So it's 35 million tons of food produced in Canada is lost or wasted, and so a third of that could be rescued. So that's a lot of food, that's a lot of people that aren't eating, that's a lot of money, there's an economic piece there, there's a health piece, and it's really just because of the lack of maybe awareness for consumers, and then for organizations like Salvation Army or food banks or school food programs, just that willingness to think a little harder, work a little harder, and try and use some of those resources. And then to be really careful, because then some people might say, well, here we are giving food that you won't eat yourself and making poor people eat it. So then there's a public relations campaign that comes along with that. So when we were talking about all of these, every one of them, like, we've gone on the surface of every one of them, and unbridled enthusiasm to go deeper, but the fact of the matter is I don't think we can go any further with any of them until we kind of make some decisions around this room of what we want to pursue. So that's kind of where we stopped ourselves.
I do just want to ask something about that the city is looking at a little bit. It just recently came across some of our desks, like a really interesting project that was done in Richmond, BC. I don't know if you came across that.
Yeah.
It was like Mesh Food or something like
Oh,
that. And it's like that name, whatever name, I'm not sure if I'm getting it quite right, is like they're like an app developer essentially, or like a web type developer, and they partnered with the city of Richmond and did a project to essentially connect people looking for food with people that had food they couldn't use, whether it be grocery stores, with soup kitchens, with universities with like all of that, and they ended up, I think their goal was to like divert food to create 300,000 meals, and they diverted well over 600,000 meals. So, like it was incredibly successful. Yeah, and it was a one-time input of the city of $25,000. Like it was not a lot. So right now, like looking for funding for that is definitely on our radar.
That's awesome.
I think, but we need to be sure that those receiving organizations are also on the playing the game. And that
Absolutely.
they're open to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely other work to be done.
Yeah,
But just
that's
to kind of
really
let you know
cool.
that that's on our radar and we're
Yeah.
hoping to be able to do something like that. But I fully agree that there's a lot there. And
Yeah,
this is
every one of them is deep, so like I say, it will stop now.
Yeah, because then we started talking about, oh, there's all these other alternative solutions and, you know,
So
using
many
coffee
things.
grounds instead of salt to melt snow and like needing different, so we just decided that we'll come back here and
Yeah.
prioritize some
And
of
figure
those
out,
things.
yeah.
And some of the exercise, I think, was let's have a look and see what we have or don't have.
Yeah.
Report back,
Mhm.
and then we try and come up with some kind of action plan based on the information that we found. I think we're taking minutes of what you're presenting. I'm not sure, do we want to continue just with everybody presenting what they have, and then after that, we'll see where we go with actions? Does that sound?
Sure.
I think it's a good idea, especially given, like you said, Karen, I think a lot of things are going to touch on similar bylaws, and then we can kind of see from
Yeah.
there.
There's synergy there. We'll move to it. Thanks for that. There's a lot of, there's a lot there. Uh, The second one was, well, you're up again.
Yeah.
Healthy food, beverages in rec centers. We're
Yeah.
pretty specific.
Yeah, I think Morgan and I probably sort of are passionate about this stuff.
It's also like an area that we know a lot of has been done
To
and
locate
advocated
from.
for,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So I had a look through like the city bylaws and policies and nothing, and I think that's what would have come up in the scans too. So the Harvard Stroke Foundation of PEI has done an audit of the recreation facilities in PEI, and there is a report available to the public on that now. And Chris Drummond from Parks and Rec from the city actually participated in that steering committee. And there's some other great, you know, scans and reports from New Brunswick, from Ontario, at all of these shifts in environments to ensure that there are healthier food environments. So Sheena and I had, you know, looked at all these reports, but I'm very familiar with these from my work role too. What I focused on was looking through some of the bylaws, and unless I was overlooking and not using the website correctly, I couldn't find anything that actually, there's nothing that is in place that would actually support a healthier environment, which is why we've got vending machines with pops and vending machines with chips and gravy and poutine at rinks. So I think that's where the gap is that the policies and bylaws don't exist to be supportive. And they don't say that they can't serve X, Y, Z. And the PEI scan did do a lot of work with the stakeholders, like actual rink and rec facility owners. And there's good evidence to help them to understand the return on investment, because there's that fear of, okay, well, if I don't serve fries, I'm not gonna make it, but there's evidence to show that the shift in whatever you're serving and what's, you know, more visibly available, or you know, the healthier options, there is that evidence to show that the return on investment, they don't have a huge impact whatsoever. And so looking through those bylaws, Sheena and I were like, oh, should we start reaching, but I didn't want to start reaching out to folks until we had the conversation here. But as Morgan said, this is probably like the lowest hanging fruit that we've got, because there aren't bylaws that sort of counter what we're talking about. We just want to make the environments more supportive. And so what are the policies that we can do that? The evidence is there's reports, and then we already have done the scan with stakeholders in PEI. So And Charlottetown stakeholders were part of that. I know that Bill Lyant and Chris Drummond was on that committee. So that's where we're at. I don't know if we want to keep going through the other ones or have further conversation about that one now.
I was just curious if, do you know, have you had a chance yet to look at like what other cities have? Like, do the other cities have like a policy say for what?
They've got sort of like the toolkits,
Okay.
per se, and I think it would just be a matter of applying those best practices to have a policy.
To
support
implement
that.
policy in
Yeah.
for sure.
I don't think there would be anything about bylaws unless we got
No, I
to a
think it
place
would be
where we're
policy
like
as well.
banning poutines and things like that. But you know,
Yeah.
I think the first phase is the policy to ensure that it's supportive. But there are
Yeah.
best practices out there for sure. So
Yeah, and I know too, and I don't want to like volunteer her, but what's the title again? It's basically Christopher Drummond's like his assistant kind of like it's like he supervises, and she has a kin degree from UPI and studied like nutrition and stuff, and so has like pretty big interest in that area and like works closely with like a lot of the rec centers and stuff.
yeah,
So she might be a good ally
yeah.
as this moves forward to chat, and of course Christopher and Frank as well. But
And my coworker, Morgan Hoser too, Erin Cusack, she's sort of my counterpart in my work role, and she was directly involved in this project, and so I can just shoulder tap, and the province could therefore be a partner. Like I wouldn't have to be the province partner.
Absolutely.
She could be that partner, because that's work that she was heavily involved in. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking kind of like,
From the
I think
city.
it's easy to put a policy in place. I don't think we'll have too much trouble. I don't know, who knows? I'm not that experienced with this, but I don't think we'll have too much trouble getting a policy in place. It's the execution of the policy that
And
will have more-
enforcement.
and enforcement of the policy.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking like, I'm trying to think of like who on city staff
Right.
potentially may be able to take on some of the legwork behind the policy, and I'm not sure, but that's one potential person that I can think of.
It's
Back
worth a
when the
conversation to
council was
say.
fairly new, we had somebody from a hospital in Halifax Skype in and talk about the healthy food alternatives that they adopted and how incredibly popular it had become. That people from the community were going to the hospital to eat.
And people like spend their evenings and weekends in these settings. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's not like what's available to them, that's what they're going to access. And if we can in any way create that supportive environment, and I think, you know, the rec facility is the first phase of probably a whole supportive environment thing. Hospital like QEH in Charlottetown could be a next phase too, right? They
Well, I know
there, so.
it's been a few years since I've been to a Holland College football game. But if you go to a Holland College football game, it's really great. You got the band that plays jazz music, which is really cool. But also the concession stand is run by the Culinary Institute.
Oh,
So
wow.
they've got really good food.
Yeah.
So it's good music, good food, and halfway decent sports.
That's cool.
Tailgater. Big tailgater.
Yeah.
So there's an example right here that we could do here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's true when like our main food, promotional events are Burger Love and what now, Meat and Potatoes Month or something like that. But, you know, we should have a Vegetable Love.
There is.
There was.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Veg Fest.
See, I don't know about it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we're in the promotion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they haven't got much money.
I don't think the EIDA has put the $50,000 behind that.
That makes me think that Veg PR might be a really good partner
Yeah.
for this type
Yeah.
of
I think,
project.
yeah.
Yeah, because there really isn't, like, downtown Charlottetown, it's all restaurants, and there's really no, and it's all like, it's all brown food, right? Like, there's really not.
It is pretty beige, you're right.
Yeah, there's really not like a lot of healthy choices. So,
It's modestly unrelated, but sort of close. With Simmons being rebuilt.
Yeah,
Great opportunity for like a proper kitchen,
absolutely.
and maybe like a place where Hong Kong students go to demonstrate their
Yeah.
skills. Or
That's
who knows?
music to my ears. Using the
that-
spaces as like an avenue to create these environments.
Yeah. I think in general, this particular piece, it would be really good to sit down Parks and Rec on. It would be good. Yeah, and sooner probably than later, given things like that.
Before Tim
Yeah.
Hortons gets a spot.
So what role can this council play in getting those things onto the city's agendas?
Right. I would say for this particular example, my recommendation would be to put together some kind of a draft policy.
Okay.
And then it would eventually need to start going to the committee level, but then I would say probably that we try and sit down with certainly Frank Quinn, the manager, Parks and Rec, and Christopher Drummond, and I'm not sure, maybe I'm not sure, I would want to talk to them about who should be at that table exactly, but, and just talk to them about that, really. I know like you were wanting to target like city affiliated places like Eastlink and Bell Alliant. They would need to be at the table too, but it might be best just to start with some internal people and see where they can go.
And sharing that it's like across all those facilities too, like Cody Banks, like if there's a vending machine there, what's in, like, and that's part of what that scan was. And, you know, if we're doing it only at the Bell Alliant, well, that's not capturing all the families, and that's,
No.
so,
So I would say kind of like a draft policy and some like action items or like kind of a plan, and then talking to them about that, because like I say, I really do think it's important. Well, it's obviously important to get their buy-in, but also like some staff power, and I can maybe start to have a few of those conversations as well, because I know parts of Parks and Rec are very overwhelmed. Like they need more staff and probably aren't going to get it soon. But there's other parts that I feel like maybe have some capacity, so we can approach it from a way of like pitching it.
Yeah.
If we can pitch it in a certain way, I'm wondering if maybe we can.
Maybe a recommendation like if you go to a fast food restaurant now, I believe their menu lists how many calories the items are.
Yeah.
Maybe the rec centers should be doing the same thing.
Well, even
there's
fast
a
food
number
restaurants are
of
trying to
different-
become more healthy and
Yeah.
sustainable, you know, I mean, they've,
And there are a number of like action items that, and some of these rink and rec center owners have been at workshops to understand what some of the, like, whether that's one of them, I'm not sure, but I know shifting what is, you know, let's say the concessions here and what's right here available, people are still gonna grab the apple or banana in the same way that they're still gonna grab the
donut.
caramel or something.
There are best practices that exist around healthy food and supportive food environments that like, we don't have to ponder over. Like
They're
they
already
exist
there.
and
Yeah.
they're really well laid
Yeah.
out and well researched.
And
And
it's just-
I think that the Heart and Store Foundation are community
Yeah.
experts in this.
They
I
are.
think that it's really critical to like
They would be the first
use
people.
our like internal position to help support their voice.
Yeah.
And like we don't even have to like really engage the community, like they've already done it, so.
We just
I
need
think
to
that this
advocate
is like a
for them.
really interesting policy, one of them to start with, because
Yeah.
a lot of the work is done for us.
The consultations have already happened, the
Yeah.
data's been collected, the best practices are already out there locally and globally.
Yeah,
We've got the community partners, we've got like the provincial experts too,
Yeah.
and then, you know,
there's
what we're
there's
in
just
the
tons of
city.
people that are already working on this.
Yeah.
But like you said, like I think that it's been difficult to reach
Yeah.
the person and to work around that kind of staffing, those
Yeah.
staffing issues and
Yeah.
that like enforcement issues. So like if that, I think that that's the right role for us.
Yeah.
So like how can we help? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Basically,
And
let's
maybe,
help
like, part of it is-
translate it into action,
Yeah.
what they were wanting to do, that they're at the point of, okay, we've got this report, and now we're at the, we can support the action
Yeah.
piece.
And like, even if it's an essentially copying and pasting what the Heart and Stroke Foundation has done into
I
a
would-
policy for the city.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like,
I
that-
wasn't
yeah.
planning
They've
on
already
it.
done all the
It's
work.
done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if that's all you're doing, if you're just putting
just
it
gonna
as a
advocate.
coherent thing that applies, and like, I don't know, maybe this is obvious, but like for right now, I think just applying to city facilities only makes sense.
Oh,
I
no,
just-
yeah, that's all, yeah,
That's all that
really
you
is.
can, that's all that you can do.
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
So anyway, even if you're just copying and pasting that stuff in and making it city specific and pitching it to the Parks and Rec and maybe giving them some suggestions as to the best way to
I
implement.
definitely wasn't planning on writing anything new, for sure, because it's all there.
You already had-
So
you already
I
had-
haven't really done any work for this one because
For
it's
this,
already done.
For this
Oh, you picked
initiative, I
it.
know I think it depends on the policy or the bylaw to be addressed, but with this particular instance, like, at what point do you think that we should potentially connect with the heart and stroke? Like, to me, that's kind of a first step.
That's what I was.
Okay, as
totally.
opposed to like going to
Yeah, I
Parks
was,
and Rec.
when I say copy, I think you wanna have the kind of like some of these drafts in hand, they go to Parks and Rec.
They would be able to provide us with something.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly, and so
then-
I was, gonna say,
Yeah.
when I say copy and paste, I mean.
And that's a
information
group that I was
consultation.
going to reach out before this
Yeah.
month's meeting, but I thought I'll hold off, so that's
Yeah.
my first step then is.
And they could go to Parks and Rec too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Why
mean,
not?
they could get
Yes.
the takeout meeting for
The
sure.
more people that are going to Parks.
I think sometimes you do this work and it doesn't go anywhere, and that really is unfortunate, but if you don't do some of it in advance, if you don't have something tangible in advance to show them, it's never gonna go anywhere, because they're not gonna even
Yeah.
understand.
Okay,
So,
that's great, thank
yeah.
you.
Is there value in extending that to city-held events? Like,
Oh,
like
Jess was
Day
working
or-
on this.
She was, yeah.
Yeah, Jess was working on this ages
I remember
ago.
talking about
And maybe they should be
this
kept
when I
separate,
started
one
my
is
health promoter role. yeah.
narrower, but.
Right, so we have some regulation, like,
There is a policy, I think, isn't there already?
there's like,
Oh, I
there,
see.
I don't think there's anything around like what kind of food that they can serve. We
Oh,
have
okay.
guidelines that have more to do with waste and
Yeah,
fit more in
it's-
with like the bring it stuff.
Yeah, this is
Um,
where the bring it stuff started, like
Yes,
the
it
styrofoam
is.
ban. Yeah.
Exactly, and so that vendor bylaw, but I don't think it gets into the type of food they can serve.
Yeah.
It is a little bit complicated because then you're starting to control like who they can give business to. I'm not saying you can't do it, I just don't think it's quite as low hanging of a fruit.
Yeah, and I was meaning more where the city is giving the food directly rather than hiring. people.
Right, right.
I mean, there's those, the pancake breakfast or the
Yeah,
hot
yeah,
dog.
yeah.
Hot dog events, you know.
Yeah.
It'd be more like meetings.
Yeah.
Meetings and stuff like that, where like, even if you're purchasing from somebody, it would be really small contracts or something like that, right? So-
Anyway, the other one's.
I think
lower
it's like when
hanging
we
fruit.
do like our own thing, we like buy food for like a barbecue or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you buy.
I think, if my memory serves me, I think that Jess ultimately was able to kind of focus from a sustainability aspect, but there was a barbecue that she hosted that she was hoping would also demonstrate that healthy food can be served
Yeah.
and that the public went for it. And that might be, do you remember that?
It's like ringing.
It was a while ago, but.
Yeah, there's some, there's
But
something.
that might be something that's worth
And it is
thinking
an
about.
important point, like thinking about, so I really see this as a first phase because it's low hanging fruit, all this work has been done, and then maybe second phase would be events, and a third phase could be like a hospital, some of those
Or
more
some public institution,
public
yeah.
institution
One of
type
the success
settings.
and experience with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's best practice for all of those settings.
Yeah.
It's out there, it's just applying it. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good point.
But yeah, so anyway, to your point, Megan, I think reach out to stakeholders you want to talk to, do that kind of thing. Let me know where I can assist or be a voice for you. And when you're ready and you want to have that conversation with Parks and Rec, let me know and I'm happy to set up a meeting and have you like little behind the scenes chats to try and hopefully, rally some support on that.
Okay, thank you.
Are those entities like the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and are they on the food asset map?
Well, like health-based organizations.
Health-based ones aren't,
No.
no. Like Canadian Cancer Society, Health, Heart, Stroke, Diabetes, they're not on there.
Was there like a decision not to put them on there?
I
Or?
don't think we ever had the conversation.
I don't think we ever had
No,
that
I don't think we
conversation,
did
yeah.
either. Yeah,
I don't know if it would make sense, but.
or
would
like
it-
even like
At
registered
least amalgamate.
Nutrition Association, like
Did
any.
that not make the cut? That was on originally.
What one, sorry?
The Registered Dietitians Association.
I don't remember.
But I mean, it's
Do they have
it's like a
physical-
bare bones website.
Yeah.
No, there's no physical office.
Mhm.
But the allied health professionals,
Maybe it's another conversation.
Yeah,
to
putting
have.
like naturopaths on it, maybe
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
if
As,
that
as
level.
me, as we would go through that review process, whatever that is, I think that would be a really good opportunity to, because I think you're right, certainly the diabetes, that makes, and the heart and stroke.
Yeah.
the heart and stroke is just so much advocacy around
So
that.
much.
Food, yeah, exactly.
One thing I will say in my work role in health promotion, to like maybe reduce some of the workload on us and the council and the city and avoid duplication, there may be, hopefully, something that would exist someday for, you know, community, like a portal or a platform for community to access some of that. So in that case, we could just link, if we're obviously hearing feedback right away, like, oh, it would be great to have health organizations on, and we could put it up, because I don't think that's gonna be for another year at least, knowing how slow things.
Okay, so it might be good.
But it might be tough to, it would be a conversation, like some things will be, a lot of things would be great.
Yeah,
Whether
it's
or
kind
not
of like
we
the
do it.
restaurants, like,
Yeah.
well, an easier conversation, I think, than the restaurants, but it's that vetting and inclusion and exclusion criteria and rationale why it would get a little bit complicated, but it's a good point, and I don't think we ever had
It's
the
definitely
conversation.
never really had the
like
conversation.
a larger conversation
Yeah.
Yeah.
at some point, yeah.
We'll add that to the agenda at some point.
In August.
Thanks, Mamie. Next one is backyard food production. Karen and Morgan. What you find?
Do you want me to start, or do you want?
Sorry, I'm just making some notes here. I, do you want?
However you want to tackle it.
You go for it.
I'll just start with what I've kind of, yeah. So I did the bylaw review and the policy review. I didn't really see any policies that had direct application to backyard food production, but I certainly did see two bylaws that could potentially impact backyard food production. So the first one was the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly premises bylaw, which does make provision for agricultural use within that bylaw. So there is reference to allowances for certain things to happen for your grass to grow actually above 150 millimeters. If you're using that grass for some agricultural purpose, it can be higher than that 150. And there is permission again for something like, a heavy undergrowth. Again, if there's some sort of an agricultural use or purpose for that undergrowth. So there is a provision, certainly within that bylaw, to allow for backyard food production. And again, I think it's rather supportive. Then we look at the nuisance bylaw, which we've already referred to, and it explicitly states that there shall be no livestock, and that includes domestic fowl, horses, donkeys, mules, bulls, oxen, cows, or other cattle, which I'm not really sure what that is. What that other cattle is.
A bull?
They named them pretty much all. Bull, the gelded bull, and the cow, so they're all there, but I know other cattle too.
No water buffalo.
Yeah, I guess no bison in the backyard. Goat. There was no comma between goat and swine, so it says goat, swine. So again, I included the comma when I brought it here because I assumed, you could maybe bypass that as if you wanted to challenge the bylaw. Sheep, lambs, mink, fox, emu, or ostriches, or the young thereof. But it does exclude dogs and cats, so you can't have dogs and cats in your backyard. It's a very distinct and very clear exclusion of livestock production. As I said, I think food production in terms of gardens and excluding perhaps the ability to compost, the unsightly premises bylaw certainly allows for agricultural production within on
Sorry,
properties.
Karen, it does allow for production, but I think there is if you were to just leave unkept for pollination, it doesn't capture that because...
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Because my friend actually, her neighbor reported her and the city called her. And so it doesn't capture that while it does capture the actual food production.
Actual food production, yeah. That's true.
Sorry.
So if you leave your, if you leave your grass and the weeds unkept for pollination, that is based on the unsightly
Premises bylaw.
you would have to.
You're technically not in compliance. You're not
So
complying
the
with the
city
answer.
requires you to mow your lawn. like-
It has to be at 150 millimeters. The grass has to be kept at 150 millimeters.
It's only enforced if someone complains.
Yeah.
So most people get away with it.
Yeah.
But
If
it's
there
not
is a
protected and you
complaint.
will get
Yeah.
And
contacted if
Yeah,
someone complains.
in her case, it wasn't food production, and so
Yeah.
it didn't,
But indirectly, could be.
it could be.
It's food for bees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bees are not on the bees are not
Yeah.
on this
Yeah.
So you
list.
can have an apiary in your backyard?
No, but
No?
no, you can't. But I don't think the city would allow it, but I don't think it's specified in there.
It's not explicitly specified in
It's
here.
not protected.
Bees are
and
not
I don't think-
named as livestock, which is really quite interesting. But I mean, you can't really name bees as livestock because they travel. I mean, we're gonna just put up signs, bees, stay away. Do not enter.
I cut off your train of thought.
But yeah,
I
no,
just wanted to, like, figure
so those are the two main bylaws, the nuisance bylaw and the unsightly premises bylaw are the two. Now, I did undertake to do a bit of a jurisdictional scan to see what's kind of happening in other places, and so I started with Halifax, and Halifax has actually done a very fairly comprehensive and fairly rigorous jurisdictional scan stating that in Nova Scotia, the municipality of County of Kings, Wolfville, and Bridgewater allow the keeping of chickens, in this case, for personal use in residential areas. Vancouver, Victoria, Surrey, Kamloops, Oak Bay, Kingston, Brampton, Niagara Falls, Guelph, Caledon, Corner Brook, and Whitehorse also have provisions. Gatineau, Toronto, and Edmonton are currently carrying out pilot projects for backyard chicken production in residential zones. So basically, this is happening all over the country, but not here. But it is happening under a fairly rigorous set of rules and guidelines. You can only have a limited number of chickens. They have to be hens. There are property line setbacks. There are animal welfare and animal control bylaw, enforcement issues. You have to register these chickens so that everyone knows where they are and who they belong to, just as you would license your dog. And in most cases, actually in all cases, the slaughter is prohibited, and these animals are only, they're hens, they're only to be used for egg production. And in every single case, the bylaws are being developed and used to address food insecurity in those communities. And I have a suspicion that in those communities there probably are a number of newcomer families that would have a particular interest, and that's not to exclude others, because I certainly know many other people, but and other communities that would be interested in backyard livestock production, chickens in particular, egg production. So again, we have best practice, very well established across multiple municipalities of similar size and similar scale and much larger. The other thing that in some cases, in Toronto as an example, they've identified particular locations throughout the city where this kind of backyard food production is appropriate, and other areas where it's not. So again, also they've mapped it out where it is just a little bit, perhaps maybe not on Spadina, but maybe perhaps in some of the outlying areas in the GTA. So so again, just to reiterate, well-established bylaws, well-established enforcement, best management or best practice all over the place, and always in every single case linked to addressing food insecurity in these communities. And that is definitely, we have significant food insecurity issues in this city, and it's identified in the ICSP. So I think it's time to really take a look at this and carefully examine why this is not happening in this city.
Karen, Halifax, so they did this review, do they have a policy?
They do,
Okay.
yeah, they do.
And I know lots of people that have.
Yeah, and they passed their bylaw, so.
Yeah, that's right. It's
yeah.
just, that's a very good,
Standard.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
We have to
for
look
some
to
reason like
Nova
Halifax
Scotia.
holds more weight than like Toronto.
Well, of course, I mean, yeah,
Of course.
Toronto, of course, I mean, it
Well,
is,
and Toronto's a bad example, but I just
But,
think the
yeah.
maritime city
Yeah.
holds a bit more.
absolutely.
So is
And,
it families who are feeling food insecure that have the chickens, or is it people that are having the chickens to donate to food insecure establishments?
in most cases, they're for personal use only, so you're not able to sell. I suppose you could share, perhaps, but you're not, the sale of the eggs is, in most cases, prohibited. Well, I think in all cases, again,
Oh,
prohibited.
yeah.
I think what Karen means about like the food security aspect is that like whenever people are like, why is this being examined now? And it's usually some kind of link to food security, like some kind of internal like
Like a
within the
response
municipality staff, they're like, the food security is an issue that matters to our citizens, and therefore this is one thing that we can address that is like connected to that. Yeah, it's not really about
No, I was on a lower level there.
Mhm.
To the point of profit, I assume the policies, because I haven't looked at them in that detail, but as you were talking, I was wondering about the profit versus non-profit, because there are always people that like to, push the envelope and ruin it for some folks. So
Yeah.
I assume there would be some like limits on quantity, or that there would be like a bylaw about profit versus, like you wouldn't be able to sell.
The bylaw limits the amount of.
It does
they always limit the
Perfect.
amount.
Almost
of birds.
limit number
As long
of
as
birds,
it's-
so.
Lot
Always.
size?
What's that?
Is it tied to lot size?
Yes.
at all?
Yes, absolutely, yeah, so like there's
Yeah.
property
Yeah.
setbacks and,
I figured,
again,
but yeah.
you know what I mean?
As long as those components are there, I think
Yeah.
we're good.
It would be another good thing to connect to environmental health on,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
that like
Exactly.
any messages around kind of egg safety, like again, like from an education, like a citizen education standpoint, like that would be a really good part of the campaign. I found a really good resource somewhere that had just like a really great, how to and like basic health and safety standards that they had put together with their environmental health office that we could totally steal. Or connect with them to make it.
Yeah.
And
It was just really great, it was really good, like I had information on like health and safety of the birds.
Yeah.
But then also health and safety of,
People can
and,
And I mean, there is an Animal Welfare Act that would have to be, that anything
Yeah.
like this would have to be compliant with. And so like in some of these cases, they actually define the size of the coops and locations of coops and things like that. And I mean, the bylaw can be as detailed, or the rules can be as detailed as you like. And I think that that's probably, if we were to promote or to encourage adoption of a bylaw like this, that would want to have those kinds of details clearly defined, because I think that animal welfare is serious, and and I think
I think also for the support aspect, because it seems like it's something that just keeps getting shut down at council level. But if we, if it's very detailed and it's pretty impossible to, it's not like we're gonna have goats and chickens running through the streets. Like if the policies and bylaws are detailed enough, that would warrant, probably that interest and exploration. I think as detailed as possible
Absolutely,
would be helpful.
and it's the models too, like having local models that, this has happened in other municipalities, and
Crazy that we're not.
things did not fall apart.
and the world didn't crash.
Yeah.
This is not a new idea.
Was anyone involved with the failed attempt a couple of years ago?
No.
Because I feel I would like to learn more about it as well. I'm just curious. I think there was a couple key things behind the failure of it. And I think, I don't take this with a grain of salt, but my understanding is one of those things was it kind of came out of nowhere.
Okay.
Like there wasn't a lot of staff engagement on it. There wasn't, like, the behind the scenes didn't get laid to my extent. to my understanding.
It tastes to me like there was just kind of some citizen interest, and
Yeah.
it was brought forward.
And
as-
somehow it got put on like a council agenda type deal.
Oh.
And like I think that's maybe a little extreme, but just I think like
Possible that was what happened.
Yeah, but I know, like I say, I've heard more. It's like bits and pieces that I have.
Hmm.
Anyway, I just think it speaks to those stakeholder meetings and all of that, which I think you'll know.
Yeah. It might be worth seeing, like who was involved in that and.
Ramona
getting some-
knows more of the ins and outs of what happened as well, even just.
I just found an article from 2017 too, so
Yeah.
Okay,
like
yeah.
a quick breeze through that would be
Probably.
really interesting to see
Yeah.
if anybody's interviewed or,
Yeah.
because they might be,
Maybe-
it might be interesting to talk to them, you know, like
Yeah.
it's been 5 years, like I think a lot has changed in other
Well, it's a new
municipalities
council.
and
Yeah.
New mayor.
a lot more is known now.
Has
so.
there been like a poll done on how many people actually want?
That's a good idea.
I think that's a really great
That's
Because
our
if
next
it's 12 people.
I think that should be
then
our
it
next
works.
That's
step.
definitely.
I think that should be our
Well,
next
there's also
step.
12 people interested in like, what's the harm, you know, like.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Like especially if the
Yeah.
town strongly opposed or if there's strong rules or regulations.
One other thought that I had about kind of like that drumming up of support is I thought it was interesting that you mentioned some cities are doing pilots. And
Yep.
sometimes it can be easier to get them to agree to say, we would like to pilot this in this neighborhood for this amount of time and see how it goes.
Yep.
Just a thought.
Because I could see it not in like historic Charlottetown where it's like 90% Airbnbs. Like, you're not
Disagree
gonna,
strongly.
yeah, you're not gonna wanna have
Disagree
chickens,
I
you
don't
know.
know if you're gonna get support for it is my concern. But
But
I know.
But
what
would
you're
they
saying.
be zoned differently? Because if we're owned by zoning, they
The
don't have.
500,
special
the 500 lots area has its own set of rules and
Yeah.
planning. and
Oh,
so
yeah, that's
on,
right,
yeah.
that's right, okay.
Which is downtown.
Unless you're outside of that area.
yeah, I don't see why,
Okay.
like,
I
West
always
Royalty.
want-
West
I think
Royalty,
that's
East
good.
Royalty, Sherman.
Yeah,
I guess the lots would probably be bigger anyway, so.
Historic. It's like the original 500 lots of the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did not look at the Planning Act in terms of whether there would be zoning issues,
There's, yeah.
which was referred to in some of these other jurisdictions. So that is something I think that we should probably go back and have them
Yeah.
look at and see if there's anything within the planning.
I know that there is no like agricultural zone specifically,
Yeah.
and I do think that depending on what you wanted to do, if you wanted to restrict to certain zones, then it would require amendments.
Yeah.
If you didn't include that component, you might be able to get away without that.
Okay.
So,
Anyway, so that warrants another look. But I do think that perhaps our next step is, like you say, maybe, I think perhaps polling, you know, and whether we just do some Facebook polls and just sort of see, you know, who's.
If you get public support, then
That's
You know,
actually
and,
lovely.
yeah, but there you go, and that's, you know, here we go, you know, we've got
Policies
700 people that say, yeah, we'd love to see chickens, or we have 12, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and that, I
There's
think that.
advantages to both.
Yeah, exactly, so it gives us some
Yeah.
clear
To try and get
idea
more-
of the direction that we perhaps would like to pursue, so I think that should be our next.
Yeah, because then
I'm ready for that.
you've got data, your own citizens want this. Other jurisdictions have pilots and policies that have been passed. Here are detailed models and policies.
yeah.
I have concerns about livestock in the city, and I think you raised a lot of issues, Karen, and I think if you were keeping chickens in the city, you'd probably do a very good job. But I'm not so convinced that it's a good idea for the general population. First off, are you gonna start zoning how many households in a neighborhood can have chickens and not? You know, because there are respiratory issues with smells of animals. Wherever you have livestock, invariably grain is going to be spilled, and that is an attraction to rodents. And we live in a seaport town where that, you know, I think there's a reason that livestock has been banned.
But
And
things
I
are
think that
changing
there's
in
a lot of
places
good
that are really
reasons for why they
similar,
have.
like
And I
Halifax.
think that
So-
if people can have livestock, like for instance, the city bylaw to have a auxiliary apartment on your property requires a minimum lot size of half an acre. And so for livestock, I would think you would want more than half an acre. And you raised the whole issue of animal welfare and animal rights, and you know, if they have to be in a coop, I mean, I assume you've probably raised chickens before.
I have, yes.
Okay, so, I mean, when I was raising chickens, I had like a whole acre of pasture. You know, I had a lot of birds, but when you have, you know, if you had 20 chickens in a room this size, it wouldn't take very long for them to denude this entire yard. And so I think that there's a lot of issues, and if the council wants to go ahead with this, I'll just abstain. I don't want to have my name associated with supporting the idea.
Well, maybe it's worthwhile to then explore.
Well, I think that, I think we, we do have someone that does send chickens in small coops into backyards all across the province. Might be worth talking to her as well and getting some feedback in terms of what her experience has been in terms of who those people are, how that has transpired. Because I think, that's not a bad point. I think, but because we can collect some evidence with respect to what's happening now. So we can do a jurisdictional scan even here that does not actually include the city of Charlottetown, but include other areas across the province. So, and I can certainly undertake to do that. So,
another important voice on this one is probably our bylaw enforcement officer. Just really concerned with
sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Oh,
And
totally.
something else that occurred to me is do you guys ever work with the city of, with Halifax on different projects? Like, would you be able to connect with the bylaw officers there to get we could potentially get some
Experience or feedback?
I mean, it's a good idea. I don't have any I don't have a contact at Halifax.
Okay.
Okay.
But
I mean, well, let's see how,
just-
let's go down this road slowly, and then if
But if you're looking into it and you feel as though city to city contact is better than resident to city contact, I'm happy to contact someone there.
Like another point too is I am much more in favor of reintroducing wildlife corridors in urban areas. And, we used to have a lot of fox in town. If the fox return and start killing people's chickens, we're gonna have people going nuts wanting to get rid of all the fox, or hawks, or other predators, I just think it's, even domesticated cats, So there's a lot of reasons why I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that's important to raise that, and I think maybe a part of the next step would be are there scans of some of these issues, like the environmental components that you raised and the rodent aspects? There's probably documentation out there, and some of the best practices to approach some of those things. So what's out there, and that might be another next step
there are, and they are included in the regulations that are set out by those municipalities that run these programs. So,
So that information will be included in whatever action we're proposing to apply for a bylaw proposal.
Yeah, well, so I think what we should do is just look a little bit more deeply into some of these existing bylaws. I just again, we didn't spend a whole lot of, you can go as deep or as shallow as you like. And I would also, I'll do a sort of a more localized jurisdictional scan, see what's happening actually in this province. Because as I said, I do know that there is someone that actually is sending chickens out in little coops all over the place and making a small fortune doing it.
The most expensive eggs you've ever had.
They are the most expensive eggs you'll ever get.
And I do think that it's an interesting idea to have some of those sort of almost testimonials of how is this actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think that those are good points. How have those been addressed? Because those are not considerations that are unique to Charlottetown. Like you say, Halifax is also a harbor city, right? So it's, and how did they address those, or how do they consider those issues? So.
Karen, I can speak to the bylaw officer. At least one of them is my neighbor.
Todd.
Yeah.
I think we only have one, so that makes sense,
You have more? Wasn't sure you had more. So.
Well, yeah, you wanted to get a sense from him, what that might look like. I don't know, or maybe he was involved in some of those earlier conversations.
Because I've heard about the experiences of grass.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Weedy yards, but I haven't heard about the chickens.
Yeah. Yeah, if you wanted to maybe just sort of check in with him and kind of find out what's,
We may not have had any because I don't
Yeah.
have experiences.
and maybe he's opposed to the idea for, and I think it would be really nice to know why that is too, you know, I mean, not,
You have to see what his position is.
yeah, because clearly not everyone's gonna be in favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And one not insignificant issue is the fact that we only have one bylaw enforcement officer. And when thinking of any of these types of changes,
Yeah.
capacity for enforcement
Yeah,
is something that needs to be considered.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Especially with livestock. you
Yeah.
know, 'cause
Absolutely.
It's the animal welfare thing that is.
Oh, I agree.
I do think is some like there's like a collaboration, I believe, on
Yeah.
some animal welfare stuff. Like I think like dog, cat stuff gets handed over to Humane
Humane Society.
So I don't know like about
Well, and in
Well,
Toronto,
okay.
it is the Humane Society that does,
Yeah.
that oversees
which is then another.
the animal welfare piece.
to be talked
And there
about.
are animal welfare officers actually within the Department of Agriculture and
Yeah.
Land as well, so.
And then there's like the bites that get sent to like EHO, kind of, there's just this network that address
Mhm.
already these.
Yeah.
these
So-
topics.
But addressing who would be responsible,
Exactly.
because the chances are the capacity for enforcement. doesn't
Yeah, I think that, yeah,
But
so.
that could be a really good discussion piece that we could, help lead, because the Humane Society, has been focused on different areas because they've had less, like, they've done such a great job with like neutering and things like that they don't actually have as many animals to look after.
Mhm.
So maybe they would be interested in a project like this.
Maybe,
Maybe,
yeah, no, it's
yeah.
definitely worth a conversation for
Yeah.
sure.
And like all the roadside, because we buy our eggs, this guy on Brackley Road, I mean, they're great eggs, you see the chickens running around, but like obviously, I don't think he's being inspected in any way, shape, or form. And like people were actually taking his eggs and then selling them at the farmer's market. They were going in, buying his eggs for $3.50 a dozen, and then going to the farmer's market and selling it for $5. And so those eggs weren't inspected or anything like that, so like, what is the province doing with those people? And
Yeah.
like, what sort of steps are they ensuring that things are being done properly?
So Brackley Point Road in city limits or out of city?
Oh, no, yeah, it's out of city, it's in agricultural land, yes. Maybe, I
You just get someone in a pile of trouble.
Oh, no,
We have a testimonial.
it's way down. It's past
It's
Black
almost
River
in
Road.
Brackley.
But yeah, because I know North Rustico, you're not allowed having chickens, but Rusticoville you're allowed. So it's
Yeah. So.
But it's finding out why that rule was put into place. in the
I would
first
like to,
place.
could you talk to Ramona, just to kind of get a sense of what,
I'm assuming it's because of tourism.
I had a feeling it was to do with noise
Uh-huh.
and,
What
Smells.
would all be linked to tourism.
Downtown, I'm sure that
It's
tourism
tourism.
and history and all of that, but I think in general, it's more about the nuisance.
yeah, those basic
The
nuisance elements.
Well, children are very nuisance.
And health, well, yes, yes.
Oh, there's some barking dogs, like
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what the biggest nuisance is in this city, are those motorcycles.
Oh my
that
God.
I could,
Oh, they're so.
if
and
I
the
could get up
trucks.
in a hurry, like at 4:30 in the morning when they come by my window and get their license plate number, I will be calling.
Call Bernie's neighbor.
I'm calling that guy. Give me, I'll put him on speed dial, because there's a
Yeah.
guy.
We're recording everything.
Yes.
I think he drives a bike himself.
Well, he probably doesn't drive one like that,
Probably not. I haven't.
because, I mean, some of them are just outrageously,
I think he would.
overbearingly, obnoxiously loud.
Okay,
Um,
greenhouses.
And due to time, because it's 7:15.
Yep.
So there's more to be had with the chicken coops and the chickens and bylaw, so we've just, pardon the pun, scratched the surface. And we're gonna,
So you'll proceed with what you kind of
Yeah.
said, and we'll regroup at the next one.
Yeah.
yep, okay. The next one is, thank you Karen Morgan, by the way. The next one is greenhouses. Phil and Bert.
Bill and Bernie.
You want me to start, or do you want to start?
Maybe.
That's what it is, okay. So what I did was I looked at the ICSP and looked at what was in there And there's a lot of items in regards to food, number 4. And then gardening of small spaces was one of the actions, food procurement, incorporate food security, encourage food access in every neighborhood, remove barriers to backyard food production, support city-focused food projects, i.e. greenhouses was one of them. And that's the only place where I can find greenhouse. I couldn't find greenhouses in the bylaws, I couldn't find greenhouses in policies, there's nothing. You really have to go looking for it. The greenhouse is related to the accessory buildings of the act, the building act. You have to get that through the building department, or the planning department. And it's Act number 4 all the way through 4.1, 4.13, and it doesn't mention greenhouse in that at all. It just gives you square footages of what you can build, the setbacks, the sizes, the height. And I assume maybe the height, which is almost 20 feet high, might be a nuisance or unsightly.
So it's an act, is that provincial?
This, the building structures is the city planner, and he sent me this, but it doesn't say anywhere. I emailed him back saying, where is this act? Because there's nothing on the act that says if it's provincial, because now we have a new act, or a new building code.
New building code.
National.
Yeah.
But usually they put down at the bottom.
Like a header.
Was it the?
Yeah. Did you? I couldn't tell if it was provincial, city, or the national building code.
Yeah, if it was city, would have been zoning and development bylaw.
Yes.
No, that was in the provincial, the city bylaws.
Accessory building bylaw?
So that would be a bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I met with
Robert?
Alex Forbes and Mitch Twiddle.
Okay.
And because I had always been under the impression from people telling me by word of mouth that plastic greenhouses were not allowed in the city. And they both said no, they didn't know anything about that in any bylaws, and I couldn't find anything in the bylaws either.
Nothing says you can't.
And as you say, the only reference to possibly something like that was the accessory building bylaw, which is actually quite generous. It allows up to 2 outbuildings on a lot as long as there were setbacks of 6 feet from your property lines, and the height restriction, which I thought was more than ample for a greenhouse.
Yes.
So maybe we should be encouraging people to start building greenhouses.
The law, it doesn't support it. It doesn't like.
Yeah.
There is a bylaw that existed at some point, less than 10 years ago, that's mostly around plastic roof structures.
What?
Around plastic roof structures, so.
Yeah, that's what I thought
plastic.
too, but
Yeah,
we could find
there
it.
definitely is, because I went to city council on behalf of the community garden at the Culinary Institute. And because one of the neighbors complained about our greenhouse, and we had to sell it. Because we presented to them and they said, you're not allowed to keep it. So it definitely exists. So I would check maybe under the unsightly premises bylaw around plastic roof structures. That's what it would, like, and again, there's glass roof structures, or there's like the solid plastic, like those might be allowed under those codes. So maybe this is something that.
What about like Van Campens though? Don't they have part of?
Maybe they fall under a different zone.
I know there's a plastic roof barn for the horses up by the mountain, and that was held up for quite a while because it was a plastic roof structure.
Maybe they might be able to help you identify the piece that, and maybe again, like maybe it's not something that we focus on, because if it's just the plastic, maybe if it's just the flexible plastic, then maybe we don't worry about it. Like people are encouraged to build glass or rigid plastic structures, I don't know.
And if it was in the zoning and development bylaw, I mean, that thing is in like 3 stages of revisions at any given time, and it's possible just got changed, there's not a lot of fanfare.
Okay.
It's like, it's not impossible anyway.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see something that relates more to a greenhouse and what parameters you are allowed, as opposed to just guessing, well, we're part of this accessory building and we'll give it a go.
Hoping
And
that.
then getting shut down like
You
that.
get shut down because there's not a bylaw.
Yeah.
Because someone
Yeah, for
complains.
sure.
Yeah.
Someone complains.
And it says you can't have your greenhouse anymore.
I wonder if maybe the next step is just to look at other municipalities to see if there's anything specifically around.
Vancouver has
Oh,
a really, detailed.
Of course they do.
That's
on
cool.
greenhouses. But because it's a big city, bigger city, and what I was hearing earlier today, maybe I'll start looking at Halifax or Fredericton, somewhere in New Brunswick, Moncton, other
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
rural cities.
Good idea.
But yeah, it's just a lack of mention that's,
And sorry, did you say Vancouver has like a standalone policy or it's embedded in?
it's in their bylaws.
Okay.
They first started, I think it was 2006, and then it's been revised several times since then. I think the last one was 2015 or 2016.
Is it specific to greenhouses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe similar to the health food and rec centers. Just
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably,
research,
yeah.
develop.
And because you're living in that climate,
Mm.
probably it was, yes, we see a lot of greenhouses because you can,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, because of, yeah.
maybe,
But, anyway.
but it's BC.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, and there are some climate differences. So maybe you're right, like maybe a closer to home jurisdictional scan would be.
But it's
a
really
little bit more.
interesting that, like, so Alex obviously didn't know anything and he's the manager of the department. So I'm curious if it's disappeared somewhere along the way, but.
Maybe the person asked is a bylaw
Yeah.
enforcement officer.
Could be, yeah.
Because that's who
Yeah,
had break the bad news to us.
Okay.
could be.
And that's not that long ago.
Because I haven't.
2012, 2013.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine.
And similarly, what Cornwall and even Stratford have, I know they're not cities, but they, like,
Yeah.
is it just that it's not anywhere, or do they have, I
They
assume
probably
no,
have it anywhere,
but I
yeah.
assume no.
It's a good thought.
But,
Yeah.
maybe worthwhile looking, like, I know people who have greenhouses in, like, central Cornwall, not in, the country.
Well, what is it? What are they made of?
They would have not the plastic, it's like the glass.
Like
green
Lexan.
structure.
Or
and
like
like-
attached to the house? Like those wouldn't fall under this. the one
Not,
that I'm
yeah,
thinking of,
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, like a plastic roof structure.
And it could be a neighbor doesn't mind.
That's it.
Or
Send
it could
anything,
be that
and then-
totally.
Yeah.
And that's, I
a good
assume
point.
it's that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's something close to home and it's right under it.
And did the one that you have, did you say Robert put it out?
Jessica Goro?
Oh, Jessica sent it to you?
Yeah,
Okay,
because I asked her, like, do you know anything about
right,
greenhouses because of horticulture?
okay,
And she contacted Robert and he sent this.
okay,
And it is just, I guess it's part of the bylaw, accessory buildings.
right, and he said that was the only, because I was just gonna say, not that Alex would know, I'm sure Alex knows all of it too, but Robert can like spew off like every idea I saw in the zoning development bylaw, I feel like if he would be a
does
good
he
resource
work
for
at
that, so
the
if that's what you
planning?
gave Jessica then.
Does he work at the planning?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's who, if
That's
Robert
who-
got, or Jessica got it from Robert, that's who gave it to you. Yeah.
So I guess we'll just keep
Yeah.
maybe looking for more information specific so we can at least put together formulate some kind of a policy proposal.
Or maybe identify the piece, like maybe all you need is like a little, an add-on, like plastic roof structures and all that, because I think it's been a long time, but the idea was that, if you let plastic roof structures in, then people have those garages, like the temporary
Yeah.
garages, and they're really, you see them a lot in like Quebec where they don't have those bylaws.
Yeah.
And so we could maybe advocate to say no plastic roof structures except for greenhouses that fall under these, like under
Yeah.
these, they have to
So
follow
like
these
just a
rules.
section in that bylaw.
Yeah,
Section-
with like a little exception.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like
Okay.
section 3.6A,
Yeah, that might be an easier
4.6A
way to
that
look at it.
states.
Yeah, and
Except
amending
for-
would be more fun than creating, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like a lot easier.
But yeah, so just create a clause even.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't really hash out in the food waste area
The priorities.
where we should focus. And I know
We
it's
said we would come
really
back to that, but.
Yeah, the time went.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have like the home compost, packaging waste, and then the food waste recovery.
And then the
consumer behavior. Yeah, and then the consumer behavior is just a whole other kettle of fish almost.
Yeah,
You said that the
leave that
city was
one alone.
looking at that app?
Yeah, I mean, we need to find funding, and there's potentially some coming up in a few avenues that may work, but no guarantee. We will see.
Climate change secretary will have more
Yeah, I
dollars
know.
again soon.
Like the climate challenge one, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was exactly what came to mind when I learned about the project, but we did just get a big chunk of money from that fund, so. I mean, we don't plan
Millions
again,
of
but.
dollars.
They've got a lot of money.
Well, I kind of see for the composting, it's just that one in the nuisance bylaw, just section 3.12. I think that just needs to be reviewed. IWMC
Yeah.
needs to be taken out of that. And, you know, or put in a clause that's specific to composting. And then if the city wants to have a little bit more advocacy around home composting, then that's just a web page that you put up
Yeah.
just saying, compost at home. It's great.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's much, because I don't even, like, unless we did a poll on who is actually composting now at home. But I think the larger one with the restaurants, how we can coordinate some of their plant-based products to go. You know, there's a lot of homesteaders on the island that have pigs that, you know, I'm sure they would love free food.
So then maybe from what I'm hearing, then maybe there's more research to be done in that area and a fairly like easy change on the nuisance bylaw.
Yeah.
Originally, I was thinking maybe couple everything together, but after saying that, I don't think you want to couple anything with the backyard food because otherwise it might just all get shut down together. Like, I don't want to be like negative on that, but just keeping like some simple changes that are pretty likely to be supported, separate from something a bit more divisive is probably a good idea.
Because I'm assuming anyone that has a backyard garden now has they're most likely, majority of them are composting because you get a lot of waste from gardens.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
and they would want to put those inputs back into their soil instead of going and buying compost. So people are composting here, but apparently the nuisance bylaw says you can't.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that needs to be changed. No one would say not to compost, but it's just making
It's
the
protected.
bylaw a little bit
That's
more
it.
robust around protecting people to do that. And then, I think from the restaurant standpoint, we can talk to restaurants, see if they'd be interested in it.
Yeah, and maybe looking like, is anybody else doing this? And how are they doing it? Because that's important too. I mean, if every restaurant in town is interested, you still need to know how to do it and like the city's probably not paying for that. The city's not going to accept
no.
actually. So it's kind of how do you do that? How do you not?
But it's like
who coordinates? Because
who would use the compost? Legacy Garden, you know, all these community gardens could use that compost. So
You're absolutely right.
If they coordinate,
Because we're not allowed to compost.
So it's not the city getting involved and us going in with garbage bags and picking up compost, but I'm just saying, how can we facilitate and coordinate and help people and connect all these different entities together?
So just looking maybe at how they're doing that or thinking about how that could be done.
Yeah.
And then
or even examining that best practice in other jurisdictions too.
Exactly.
The packaging waste thing, I mean, it's just COVID. Just wait until COVID.
It's not a good time for that one, unfortunately.
Can't touch that.
And wait until, because by December 2021, we're supposed to not have any single-use plastics in Canada, apparently. So we'll wait until, see what Justin says.
Deadline passes. And
the classic.
It's kind of like the Paris
Make the
Accord, right?
deadline.
Yeah. 2050 is our goal.
Yeah.
Sure.
So maybe looking into a bit more on that, the food recovery and how different municipalities have.
The compost,
Or just on the actual food to going to food.
Like the imperfect.
Yeah.
Kind of
The
going.
imperfect that didn't meet the quality standard at wholesale place or close to the best before.
Just redirecting for that food insecurity. I can help you.
So maybe we could look into.
There's even a non-farm element to that too, eh? Like there's some food
a
waste.
whole other.
I know it's not where the most food waste, like that's not where the bulk of the food waste, that's not the point of.
And I think I stopped, or in thinking about it, stopped to the.
At the
from farm
distribution.
level, but starting at distribution to wholesale, like distribution, wholesale, retail.
Gotcha.
Because the rest has its own systems that are and mostly outside the city. I think that's
Absolutely.
the other
It
piece
was-
other than the care place.
Yep.
Interesting though, in the system that was done in Richmond though, it was kind of like anybody who had food
Yeah.
could sign up.
Right.
So farmer outside the city could easily sign up and then they
Yeah.
post what they have or whatever and
Yeah.
the soup kitchen says, oh, I want that,
Yeah.
like whatever
Turn around
it
and
be.
call care.
So it kind of
Yeah.
opened it up to anybody. who-
Yeah.
It didn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't limiting, it didn't seem.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting model.
It'd be interesting to see how they dealt with the food safety on the receiving end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, okay. I'll continue to dig into that, I think,
Okay.
if that's reasonable. Yeah.
Sure.
Great. We are over. Great. Sorry, and I know Katrina had something else.
Yeah, we have a couple of items left. One for sure, I'm not sure about the new business. The asset map update.
Yeah, it's very quick. Basically, it got launched, which is great. Unfortunately, it got a little lost in some, I think, provincial hubbub that was going on in the news at that time, so we didn't really get coverage. And then 2 days later, The Guardian put out that article they interviewed you for, Morgan.
Oh my God,
Which was
before Christmas.
so annoying that
I
2
did
days
see that,
after we
yeah.
launched, that's when they put it out. That saying
I thought
we
that
were
was on
going to
purpose.
launch.
Oh,
No.
I skimmed, to be honest, I skimmed it and I was like,
So-
what the heck did I even say to them?
Yeah.
Because that wasn't like,
That was
Early
like community
December.
conversations probably, wasn't it?
it was. It was
Yeah.
whenever we were promoting
It was.
that. It was all overall very confusing.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
any communications,
Guardians.
there's a lot of communication errors happening, and we're still very short of communication staff, which is an ever improving thing. We're getting better, but it's just been tough in the city lately. And they're doing what they can. So, but anyway, our communication staff is reaching out to the Guardian to say, hey, we kind of screwed up here, and hopefully they will be interested in covering what we've done now. But also, we're gonna do a bit of a push, just put some money behind some like Facebook boosting and
Yeah.
some posts. I reached out to everybody on the map, let them know we're there, which we're getting some really good feedback through. So lots of
Excellent.
excitement, so that's great. And if you guys have anybody in your networks you feel like should be reviewing it, please send along. But hopefully that kind of push and maybe reaching out directly to some of the media will get us a bit more coverage on that. And then the only other thing is just, Raisa was really great at helping get that ready for launch, which is awesome. She did a fantastic job. And I think now she's kind of been diverted to another project for a bit, but something on her radar is doing a bit of kind of analysis around it as well, which would be exciting to see.
Oh,
Just,
excellent.
like some of the breakdown of assets in
Sorry,
different neighborhoods.
who's gonna do that?
Raisa.
Okay.
And like maybe, I think she's gonna try and work with GIS to like do some overlays with, you know, like demographic data and that kind of thing. So maybe slow coming, but it's in the works.
Yeah, that's great.
I see the asset map just like so much potential.
Oh, yeah.
So much potential. Right now, it's just, it's like a newborn baby. We
Yeah.
can't do anything except spit up and,
Yeah.
but, it'll eventually.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like AI, you know.
Yeah. It'll just keep.
That'll be so.
Thank you,
We'll be
and
so
Raisa
proud of
for
it.
that, and thanks to Raisa for going through all those videos too.
Yes, oh, that's the other thing, all of the community conversations videos are up
Certainly
as
did
well.
watch
those.
Some of them are a little rough, I would say, not in content, but just in like, there were so many tech glitches that some of them,
Oh, that
but I
first
just feel like
one
there's a
probably.
missing
The
chunk,
first one
and it's
was-
really unfortunate, but we
Yeah.
decided a missing chunk wasn't justification to scrap the whole thing. It was better to have it there with a missing 2 minutes than,
Yeah.
when, who knows where. It was weird. So they're a little funky, but they're there. So that's the only update of all of that.
Good.
And those videos would be, how do you access those videos?
They're on the community conversations page, which is like attached to the food council page, and they're also on the
On
YouTube channel.
YouTube. And the video is embedded right on the website, so
Yeah.
it's just right there. I saw my face and I just cringed a little bit.
People, we always do that. We all do that. You're stunning. You're gorgeous. It's true.
That's,
That's that.
thanks for the work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
so much.
no, it feels so good to finally get that
Yeah.
out there.
Good. Yeah, it's great.
And now it's tangible to use, to Brad's point, you know, how can we use it for tangible composting things, not to drag that conversation on, but
Yeah.
it's alive and we can
Yeah, and
move it forward.
and I think that's what we really needed to do so that we could see how we
Yeah.
can use that.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
There was someone at our last council meeting, and I apologize, I forget her name, I think from UPEI. When we were at the fire
Oh,
hall.
are you talking about Quinn?
Oh, this
Yeah.
strategic planning.
Yeah, Quinn.
Great.
The landscape architect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is she still involved in?
She's still with the city, yeah.
Okay.
Was there something you were,
No, I was just wondering, like, is she working on a specific project with RAISA or
so Raisa's an intern with, she's in the environmental studies program with UPI, and she's an intern with us doing her co-op, and she'll be doing her second co-op term through the summer with us as well. Quinn is a intern with the climate sense thing, so she's like, it's like a job, I guess, like they hire multiple different people. So she's with us for 6 months, and then she'll be with the municipality of Victoria by the sea for 6 months, doing like something on climate action planning for them. So for us, she's working on a number of different projects. Right now, she's sort of been focused on the big stormwater management grant we got from the Climate Challenge Fund, and like site selection that will be like most impactful for some of our infrastructure projects around that, and homeowner support projects. And then she's been working a bit like around planning for some parks and things like that, but I think her plate's a little full at the moment. But she's very interested in food, and if you had something you wanted to chat with her about, I'm sure she'd be.
I was just wondering how many people we have that we're relying on to help with certain projects, or.
Me. Hi, everybody. Yeah, you've got me, Quinn a little bit, but it just sort of depends. Like, I think her work will kind of, I'm not sure exactly where she's headed, and like I say, she's only with us for 6 months. And then there's research support as well, but mostly that me.
Because there's a lot of work, and I sense with, moving the minutes off your plate.
Yeah.
That is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because you're busy. So I was just trying to see, well, okay, who else is working and supporting what you're doing, that if we're coming up with items that we know that there's support there somewhere.
Yeah, like you're talking about like all these policy meetings and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's still mostly me, but I think that, like you say, all of these hit very firmly on the ICSP mandates. Like they fall very much with my job. I mean, the big thing with the minutes was really less so maybe for me, but there's some staff members that are involved with multiple advisory boards, and the minute taking was starting to almost inhibit some of our ability to participate in them and to like, you know what I mean? So they didn't want staff's ability to be like meaningful contributors to these boards to be inhibited because we had to spend this time taking meetings, like especially if you're on multiple boards. So the council advisory committee just decided that they would change the structure so that it was on council and not staff member. Yeah.
Okay. And if for minutes, because I rarely bring my laptop with me, if our next meeting, just so we don't choose who brought a laptop.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be bringing a laptop. Could you maybe try working on a schedule?
I can do the next one. I'll volunteer to do the next one, and then we could establish a schedule either through email or at the next meeting.
Yeah, that sounds
Do
good.
it alphabetical.
Oh, Walton.
I mean, my
First name or last name?
It would start with like Morgan or Palmer, so, right?
I guess we're going backwards if we're going to go there.
M&M.
Megan.
Morgan.
I'd be
Why don't
last
you just
because
do that?
she'd be
Morgan,
first.
Megan, if we're going backwards.
Oh, but if we're going last
Oh my
name,
God,
Adams,
go
we're going to have to go
backwards, just
down
go
and all the way
forward.
back up.
You guys are silly.
Let's just start for next.
I'll just
meeting.
bring my laptop. It's Megan.
Okay, it's
Sounds
Adams. Walton is at the end. Listen
I'll
to
do
it.
the one after Megan. I just didn't want to do this month because it's just a bad week.
Well, March is not a fun time for anybody.
I feel like
It's a misery month.
So what's the schedule? Do we settle it?
Megan next time.
Megan is next.
Well, like, is it following an order?
No.
Well, after that, we'll get more volunteers.
Colleen did indicate that she would do the one after Morgan.
Colleen, will you do,
Or after
May?
Megan. You're Morgan, Megan.
You're doing April, you're doing May?
As far as I know, unless I travel somewhere.
You are
So what
so.
is it?
Yeah, right.
What an optimist, I love it.
Or take Mish.
I was gonna go back, but yeah, I don't have it.
No.
No.
Oh, wow.
I'll motion to it.
I second.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, you know what? I'd be excited about a big stop burger right now.
And I'm only happy.
That's how bad it is.